Let's talk about this first big story. This is crazy. From Al Jazeera, Trudeau lifts emergency order invoked to end trucker protests. Amid criticism, the Canadian PM insists Emergencies Act was needed to quell anti-government blockades and occupation. Speaking to reporters on Wednesday afternoon, Trudeau said the Emergencies Act was necessary to help law enforcement agencies disperse large numbers of protesters who had descended on Ottawa. We get it, but it's not true. It's absolutely not true. They could have had a very small group of police officers, very small, walk up to the peaceful truckers and say, we're placing you under arrest for, obstructing a roadway, and that's it. We've seen them do this over and over again to climate change activists, to left-wing protesters. I understand Canada's a different country than the US, but come on, policing is very similar here and there. Instead, they pulled out the boot and they put it on people's necks. My opinion is that they wanted to make these emergency powers permanent. We already heard the Deputy Prime Minister in Canada say, we want this financial powers to be permanent because of cryptocurrencies and crowdfunding. And now all of a sudden, we're lifting the order. Why? I think the backlash was bad. They wanted to use the protest as an excuse to expand their powers. It didn't work. Well, I don't know what's going to happen next. Certainly, they did crush those protests. We got protests coming here into the U.S. They're trying to unfreeze bank accounts. But I'll throw it to you guys. I mean, you guys have been on the ground for a lot of protests. I don't know if you guys were following what was happening with the truckers up in Canada or at, similar protests. But I'm curious what your thoughts are based on what you've seen on the ground versus what's displayed in the news.
I think for me, the biggest takeaway was this is one of the biggest worker uprisings that we've ever seen in our history, where you actually have true, people in the middle class, working class actually uprising together. And it's not like a fringe left or fringe right. It's just a true working class coming together. Then you actually got to see the Canadian government, how they responded with just complete government overreach, using their security forces to beat up on protesters, to beat up on also members of the media. A lot of members of the Rebel News, which I'm really, truly grateful for Rebel News, because their journalists have been on the ground and just getting us these crucial videos of what's going on in Ottawa. And without them, I feel like we would be just kind of be, dependent on the corporate media. And then the way actually I look at Rebel News is actually I look at our DC riot squad in 2020, where it's like you kind of have these few on the ground reporters getting these kind of viral videos and showing you the truth. But I think one of the biggest takeaways from what's going on in Canada was that, governments all over have been completely silent when it comes to violence on peaceful protesters and also members of the media. I think one of the key takeaways that I've took away is that at least the president of El Salvador, Nayib Bukele, has come out and spoken out against this. And it's interesting to see, because for me, as well as, if these demonstrations were happening in Yemen or Afghanistan or anything like that, the U.S. government will be quickly, up in arms and telling us how we need to intervene. But since it's Canada, I mean, we've been completely silent on this issue.
Didn't Canada issue a statement about Cuba recently, like during the protest? Did you see that? Yeah. Something like that, where they're like, people should have their free speech. Like, shut up. Nobody believes you. You know what's really fascinating about this, though? The craziest thing is for me to see, you mentioned this in the intro, that Garcetti is like, bang your pots and pans for the first responders. And I'm like, you mean be a public nuisance and keep people up at night? No. I don't really care about the pots and pans. What do they call that? They call it the casseroles protest.
Casseroles,
yeah. I don't mind that. I don't care if people are banging pots and pans. I'll go and be like, woo, make some noise. But they complain about the truckers honking their horns. Now, I get it. I'll say it all the time. Different countries. But the same people in the U.S. who are supporting banging pots and pans and protesting with Black Lives Matter during a pandemic are condemning truckers for going out and protesting.
Speaking of protests, the trucker protest is like a perfect example of what a peaceful demonstration looks like. And the whole cause and effect is just to cause a disruption so that people in charge realize that we are essential to what you do and how the country works. And if we stop working, there's a huge problem. So you, as our ruler, are kind of responsible to take care of what our needs and demands is, because you are in charge of us.
Well,
and we vote you guys in.
I take my cues from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. She's a great leader. She's a thought leader for our generation, and she says that protests are supposed to make you uncomfortable.
Correct. Yeah.
And I say you're so right. Yes. You're so brilliant. I absolutely agree.
And boy, but in all seriousness, uncomfortable.
Yeah. In all seriousness, so she is right. The problem is the protests she was defending were violent, riotous. And the ones we're defending are like people parking their trucks in the street and honking.
Honking, yeah.